Let me say something that nobody says out loud. You are afraid, not of what you think you are afraid of, not of the thing you name when someone asks, not of the thing you lie awake rehearsing in the quiet hours, not of the word itself or what comes after it. That fear is real, but it is not the deepest one. It is not the one that is actually running things underneath everything else. The fear that is running things is older than that, quieter, more personal. It does not announce itself in the dramatic language of mortality. It announces itself in a different way entirely, in the feeling that something important was never quite reached, in the sense that the life being lived and the life that was possible were never quite the same thing, in the particular ache of a person who suspects, in the place where they are most honest with themselves, that they have not yet arrived at the version of themselves they were always meant to be. You are not afraid of dying. You are afraid of never having truly lived. And that fear, that specific, unnamed, deeply personal fear, is the one I want to talk to you about today. Because it is the one nobody names. It is the one that gets dressed up as something else, something more manageable, something that can be addressed with the right medication or the right distraction or the right conversation with the right person at the right time. But underneath all of those disguises, it is always the same thing. The fear that the life you were given and the life you actually lived are two different stories, and that the distance between them is now, at this point, too large to close. That fear is lying to you, and I am going to tell you exactly how. First, I want you to understand something about where this fear comes from, because it did not arrive fully formed. It was built over years, through the accumulation of moments where you chose the expected over the true, the responsible over the desired, the version of yourself that other people needed over the version that was most honestly yours. Each of those moments was reasonable. Each of them made sense in its context. Each of them was, in some way, an act of love or duty or simple practicality. But they added up, and what they added up to was a distance, a growing distance between the surface of your life, the life that was visible, functional, built for others, and the interior of it, the part that was yours before any of the roles began, the part that had its own voice and its own direction and its own particular sense of what it meant to be alive in a way that was specifically and irreplaceably you. That interior self did not disappear as the distance grew. It went quiet. It learned to wait. It learned to survive on very little, on the occasional moment of genuine presence, on the rare conversation that went all the way down, on the brief and precious intervals when the performance stopped and something real surfaced, however briefly, before the requirements of the day pulled you back. It has been surviving on very little for a very long time. And the fear you feel, the fear that gets called fear of death but is really something else entirely, that fear is the interior self finally making itself heard. It is not a warning about what is coming. It is a report on what has been missed. It is the most honest part of you saying, with an urgency that increases as the years pass, that the life happening on the surface and the life waiting to be lived on the inside have not yet found each other, and that the window for them to find each other is not infinite. That urgency is not your enemy. That urgency is the most alive thing in you. Here is the thing about the fear of death that nobody tells you. The people who face death with genuine peace, not performed peace, not the performance of acceptance, but the real thing, the kind that has weight and warmth and does not require effort to maintain. Those people are not the ones who never thought about dying. They are the ones who decided at some point to think about living instead, who turned the urgency that death creates not into paralysis but into direction, who let the fact of their own finitude become not a source of dread but a clarifying force, a way of knowing with precision and without sentiment what actually mattered. They let the fear of never having lived become the very reason to start living, fully, now, without waiting for better circumstances or a younger body or a past that went a different way. That is the only honest response to the fear you are carrying, not to suppress it, not to manage it, not to distract yourself from it until it quiets on its own, because it will not quiet on its own, because it is not a symptom to be treated, it is a truth to be honored. The truth is that you are still here. The truth is that the interior self that has been surviving on very little is not gone, not depleted beyond recovery, not too far behind the surface to be reached. It is right there. It has always been right there, waiting with a patience that would be heartbreaking if it were not also, in its way, a kind of love, the love a person has for the version of themselves they have not yet been allowed to fully be. That version is not a fantasy. It is not the idealized self of youth, the impossible standard of a life unlived and therefore perfect in its imagination. It is something more real and more available than that. It is simply the you that exists when the distance collapses, when the performance stops, when the version of yourself built for others is gently set aside, and what remains is something quieter and truer and more essentially yours. You have felt it. In moments. Brief ones maybe, but real. The moment a conversation went somewhere unexpected, and you felt something in you lean forward that had not leaned forward in a long time. The moment you were somewhere or doing something, or simply being in a particular quality of silence, and something in you recognized it as right, as home, as closer to the truth of yourself than most of your days allow. Those moments were not accidents. They were glimpses. They were the interior self briefly surfacing, briefly closing the distance, briefly showing you what is available on the other side of it. That is what you are afraid of losing. Not death itself, not the stopping of the body, but the possibility of those moments becoming the texture of your life rather than the exception to it. The possibility that the interior self and the surface life could finally, after all this time, find each other and stop being strangers. That possibility has not expired. I need you to hear that with everything you have, because the fear is loudly insisting otherwise, and the fear is wrong. It has not expired. It cannot expire while you are still breathing, and you are still breathing, right now, in this moment, which is the only moment that has ever been available to anyone for the kind of living that actually matters. The fear of never having truly lived is the most honest fear you have ever had. Honor it by doing the one thing it is asking you to do. Not to prepare, not to plan, not to wait until the conditions are right, or the body is better, or the past has been somehow resolved into something more workable. To live, now, today. In contact with the interior self that has been waiting with such extraordinary patience for you to remember that it exists and that it is yours, and that no amount of responsible surface living was ever a substitute for the real thing. You're not afraid of dying. You're afraid of arriving at the end without having been fully present for the middle. The middle is now. Be here for it. All the way here. That is all the interior self has ever asked of you. Give it that. Give yourself that. It is not too late. It was never too late. It is exactly on time. I want to sit with you for a moment in the specific texture of this fear. Not to make it larger, to make it honest. Because the fear of never having truly lived is not one feeling. It is several, layered on top of each other, each one pointing at something real. There is the grief of it. The genuine grief of looking back at years that passed while you were occupied with everything except the interior life that most needed your presence. That grief is real, and it deserves to be felt rather than managed. Not wallowed in, felt, acknowledged. Given its proper weight, rather than dismissed as unproductive or ungrateful or beside the point. There is the longing underneath the grief, the specific, alive, hungry longing for the version of your days that still feels possible even when the fear insists it is not. The longing that surfaces in the quiet hours and in the unexpected moments and in the particular ache of beauty encountered at an age when beauty feels more urgent than it once did, because you know now, in a way you could not have known before, how finite the encountering is. That longing is not a wound. It is a compass. It is pointing somewhere, and where it is pointing is not behind you, not toward the years that cannot be returned, but forward, toward the specific and available life that is still possible inside the one you are already living. And there is, underneath both the grief and the longing, something that is neither of those things, something closer to recognition. The quiet, clear, sometimes startling recognition that the interior self you have been afraid of losing contact with has not in fact been lost, that it has been here all along, that the distance between the surface and the interior, however large it grew, was never a permanent condition. It was a habit, a long one, a deep one, but a habit. And habits can be changed. That recognition is the most important thing the fear has ever offered you. Because if the interior self is still here, and it is always still here, it is the part of you listening to these words and feeling something stir in response to them, then the fear of never having truly lived is not a verdict. It is a warning, and warnings exist to be heeded, not to be carried as permanent weight. Heed it. Not by doing something dramatic, by doing something honest. By choosing, in the next available moment, to close the distance between the life on the surface and the life waiting inside it. By treating yourself, for once and at last, as the territory most worth exploring. By giving the interior self the one thing it has always needed and never quite received. Your full attention, your full presence, your full willingness to be, without performance and without apology, exactly who you are. The fear of dying is manageable. The fear of never having truly lived is the one that deserves your answer. Answer it, right now, with your life.